Hey everybody, welcome to the third day of the Sustainable Travel Summit. I'm Claire Hancock and I'm from Immersion Travel Magazine. Today we're ditching the tourist trail, where you'll learn a variety of experiences that sustainable travel offers, and you'll get a chance to travel around the world with experts like Curious on Tanzania, Echidna Walkabout Tours, Planeta, Green Loons, and many, many more. We're even going to talk about family travel. You can take part in the conversation in the chat window, or you can tweet at us at hashtag ITMSummit17. Hostling International USA is also taking over our Instagram account today, so you can pop over and see what they're up to at Immersion Travel Mag. Today is sponsored by Local Aventura, a company that connects travelers and local guides in Latin America for a unique and authentic experience. But before we set out, I'd like to talk to you about our Kickstarter. Immersion Travel Magazine wants to be everything that your travel magazine should be, but we really can't do that without member support. So please see our Kickstarter, sign up for a membership today, and thank you for your support. Let's go. Our first event today is called Don't Be Duped by Sustainable Tourism. What does it mean to truly experience a destination? Irene Lane, founder of Green Loons, is going to help answer that question, and she'll share her expert knowledge on this topic. She'll dispel popular understandings of mass tourism and sustainable travel and give us the tools we need to find truly sustainable places. Irene Lane specializes in developing sustainable tourism products, marketing strategies, return on investment benchmarking models, and community development tactics for tourism boards and individual businesses. She is a regular featured writer for the Huffington Post, among other media outlets, and a featured speaker on ecotourism strategies, challenges, and issues. She is presented at the George Washington University, the Ecotourism and Sustainable Tourism Conference, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, and for the U.S. Department of State's International Visitor Leadership Program. She's also the only person in the United States who can certify a green travel destination, accommodation, or event under the internationally accredited Biosphere label.
Hi there, my name is Irene Lane. I am the founder of Green Loons, and today we'll be talking about how to distinguish authentic travel experiences from greenwashing activities. The intent today is to arm you with information so that you won't be duped by sustainable tourism. So our discussion today will be focused on 5 main points. The first is that we're going to level set a bit and define what sustainability means in tourism. We'll then go into the qualities of mass versus sustainable tourism so one can compare and contrast. We'll talk about the role of certifications in sustainable tourism, dive into some destination examples, in particular focusing on Croatia, Ecuador, and Costa Rica. And then we'll round out the discussion where I'll provide some specific questions that you can ask tourism companies and suppliers, as well as some travel tips. So let's first talk about how to define sustainability. I like to think that it incorporates the values of C, standing for social empowerment, economic viability, and environmental responsibility. Most of the focus thus far has been on that last point, environmental responsibility, and the reason because it's harder to understand what constitutes social empowerment and economic viability for tourism. It's much harder to actually measure. So therefore, it's easier to greenwash. For those of you who may not be familiar with the term greenwash, it's the term used by businesses that insincerely promote green practices. They're advertised as reducing carbon emissions or limiting the use of scarce resources such as water, but the actual objective is to increase profits by implementing some easy cost-saving measures. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, there was a Sustainable Tourism Summit actually taking place live, and it was held in the southeastern part of the United States. It was held at a hotel, and because it was a conference, upon entry you could see these huge signs that talk about essentially making the green choice, making the right choice. And what essentially happened as I inquired more into what that actually meant was that in exchange for not needing to change towels or your sheets on a daily basis, that there would be a voucher provided for the local cafe or restaurant. And what in fact occurred was that each individual employee had less and less rooms that they would need to clean. So essentially, it was a cost saving measure on the part of the hotel because they didn't need to employ as many local people to take care of the building itself. So if there's less numbers of people that wanted that daily change of sheets or towels or whatever the case might be, then they wouldn't need as many employees. What was interesting to me was that there wasn't anyone coming into the room, period, not even to clear out my recycling bin. So essentially, it was just a cost saving measure, which, by the way, folks, is greenwashing. And what we all hope with this travel summit going on over the next couple of days, both Claire and Chris and myself and other presenters at this summit, is that you as a traveler understand that through your choices, true change in this industry can occur. So let's start with some questions that you might be asking yourself about sustainable tourism. So I list here 6 common questions. And certainly, if you feel as if you've been asking yourself these, and maybe others, you're not alone. You're certainly not alone. And as we look at number 1, with all the world's troubles, isn't it really about good paying jobs? Doesn't that take precedence over maintaining wildlife habitats or converting to solar or wind energy? Isn't that what it's really all about? So that's certainly a question to ask. Or maybe you've wondered, sustainability is so confusing, so voluminous. How do you know the big picture or what's important to focus on? Maybe your questions have been around, everyone and every destination has limited time, money, resources. So how do I understand whether destinations are making a positive impact or positive investments in tourism? Or maybe you're asking, how does the creation or administration of a certification factor into sustainability? Potentially, you could be asking yourself, well, if we just reduce, reuse, recycle and had that employed everywhere, wouldn't problems just solve themselves? And potentially, lastly, you're also asking, maybe you've wondered whether or not your choices are even making a difference. So I'm not sure if folks out there are nodding their heads, but just so you know, as travelers, you're not alone in asking these questions. There are professional tourism professionals and hoteliers and even tourism developers that are also asking themselves the same questions. So let's more specifically focus on the principles of sustainable tourism before I make an actual comparison with mass tourism. So what I've listed here are the 7 main principles of sustainable tourism. And when you start to think about visiting a destination, you might want to keep these 7 principles in mind. Now, I'm not going to say that the information for whether a company or a guide is abiding by these principles will be easy to find. It will be hard, and for many areas it might even be non-existent. But the fact that you will be looking for and asking about how companies are abiding by these principles in and of itself will create a change in the industry. So you're welcome to take a screenshot of this and kind of keep it in your back pocket. But as I promised, let's take a look at sustainable tourism from the perspective of how it differs from mass tourism. What I tried to do here was have a like comparison. So on the left, where mass tourism is defined as low cost, homogeneous, meaning it's sun, sand, sea, or whatever sort of common element that occurs in standard packages. You have your hotel couple of activities and low-cost providers. On the right, when we're talking about sustainable tourism, it's more so a variety of experiences that focus on the natural elements of a destination and or the cultural elements of a destination that truly make it unique, that truly define it to be differently than other areas. So when you're thinking about, for example, a biking tour, right? For those of us who are bikers and going through an area, we'll know very well that the experience of riding a bike might be actually physically the same, but when you're going through a particular destination and as you're encountering different flora and fauna, potentially meeting different people along the way, staying in different places along the way, and the restaurants that you're supporting along the way are going to be very, very different and are actually going to be what make that biking experience more meaningful. On the left, where we're focused on destinations that want a high number, high volume of tourists. On the right side, it's talking about how to bring in those different visitors that are more taking into consideration the social and environmental factors of where they're going, and therefore we're talking about a less of a waste management, of waste on resources, on water resources and energy, and also the waste management associated with that. On the left, it's talking about the mass arrival of consumers and tying them up with hopeful entrepreneurs. You've seen in many destinations people selling various little trinkets and souvenirs and things like that. And those are the hopeful business folks there that are endeavoring to get a little bit of your money to support themselves. Whereas on the right, it's flipping the model and it's looking at and talking with the different locals as to how they see visitors coming into the area, how do they want to actually interact with those visitors, and what infrastructure needs to be in place so that it's something so that the local destination can maintain its heritage and culture and not feel overwhelmed by the tourists coming in, where it's changing the dynamics of that locality. On the left, we're talking about how in many cases there's overvaluation and speculation as it relates to land. So, big conglomerate hotels and resorts are built that obviously affects land value, land use, but that's really the focus. Whereas on the right, it's about the conservation of those different resources and what needs to be done to regulate the numbers of tourists coming in. And just to round it out a little bit, on the mass tourism side, it's the exclusion of what they consider to be less profitable nature activities. We want to, in the restaurant scene, it's about turnover of tables, right? That's what makes sure that your restaurant stays profitable. Whereas instead, again, on the sustainable tourism side, it's less so about the turnover and volume, and more so about the preservation of the environment, educating people about the ecosystem and how it might be changing. And just to round things out, leakage of money flow. This is a big problem in mass tourism. So typically speaking, out of $1, the equivalent of $1 being spent in a particular destination, what typically happens in the mass tourism area is that up to 90 cents of that dollar leaves the area to be able to support all the influx of food, employees, outside companies that might have a hotel or a resort. And it's in essence that local destination doesn't necessarily economically benefit from mass tourism. Whereas on the sustainable tourism front, what the goals are always about is improving the living conditions and livelihood through tourism. So tourism is utilized more as a tool rather than a product. So Let's summarize what we've covered thus far. We've gone over the definition of sustainability. We've talked about the principles of sustainable tourism, compared it with mass tourism, and you've received some initial criteria for vetting tourism companies. So now let's focus on the role of certification. I believe yesterday there may have been a presentation from the CEO of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, Randy Durband. And for those of you who did not catch that particular presentation, I believe it'll be available. It might even be available now, but certainly after the conclusion of the summit. So if I were to, for those of you just that did not get a chance to participate in that, think GSTC, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, as an organization that keeps everyone honest and transparent and accountable specifically to sustainable tourism. So for those of you who are listening now that are from the United States, just as the American Medical Association reviews the policies and curriculum and credentials of medical schools and provides or takes away accreditation of those schools, so does the GSTC for Sustainable Tourism Certifications. Another example is just as the Forest Stewardship Council, the FSC, ensures that paper products are produced in a sustainable manner, so does the GSTC with sustainable tourism. So what does that mean to you as a traveler? It means that if you see advertisements for eco-sailing tours in Hawaii or eco-treks through China or eco-safaris through South Africa, you can look to see if A, there's a certification label associated with the company or the product, the guide, and B, if that label has been reviewed by the GSTC. So in essence, as mentioned here, the certifications are an independent assessment process for determining the validity of green and eco-friendly claims. I list there what tourism companies are judged on in terms of criteria, their fair trade practices, customer satisfaction, local employment, conservation, energy usage, as well as others. The concept is that visitors receive a unique experience that's rooted in local culture and landscape while supporting conservation and ecosystem protection. And for those of you who might be visually, I want to see what those labels are, here is information for you. If you're looking at particular hotels or what we call tour operators or guiding companies, what I've listed here are those certifications that have been approved by GSTC and accredited by GSTC. And then for destinations, there are two certifications in and of itself that look at destinations around the world and provide that, thumbs up. So you're welcome to take a screenshot there, but that certainly will be available to you afterwards. And then GSTC also has what we call recognized standards, and what that essentially means is a desktop exercise towards determining whether the criteria that particular certification has, as it calls itself Sustainable Tourism Certification, is in line with GSTC. So while not a through auditing process that hasn't occurred as it was on the previous slide, these are ones that are up and coming and are helping to push the envelope in the industry. So now let's dive into some specific examples. The first one that I wanted to talk about was Croatia. About 10 years ago, Croatia was considered undiscovered, although it's more fair to say it was not so much considered by Western European travelers and American travelers as a vacation destination. That's probably more accurate. And that changed dramatically in the last few years with its inclusion into the European Union, and B, its acceptance of large cruise ships at its various ports. So the photo on your left was taken in Dubrovnik at Pile Gate. And essentially during the summer months, every morning during the summer months, thousands of people, after having their breakfast on the ship, would descend upon the city of Dubrovnik. Now, a city, by the way, that only has 45,000 people. And essentially, what, with rare exception, they would all do the same thing. They would walk right into the old part of the city, maybe buy a knickknack or two, maybe have some lunch, and then go back to their cruise ship around 4 o'clock or so, just before dinner time. And having personally witnessed this day after day after day, it's very stifling. To you essentially, if you were there planning on staying there for more than a day, it was impossible to go into this area, or it certainly wasn't very pleasant. But sure enough, after 4 o'clock, it was extraordinarily pleasant. That's when all the musicians would come out, and local families would come out, and things would kind of return back to normal. But after a day of seeing this, and these are photos of my son, we witnessed what was going on, and how the city just was not very pleasant one to visit, as I mentioned. And we've also certainly thought about the strain on water and energy resources and the incredible waste management efforts taking place during those hours. That local businesses were just not benefiting from this experience of having these thousands of people descend on them every day. And it's even said that the port themselves don't benefit, the port management company, because cruise ship companies essentially say, well, if you don't want us to come to your port, we'll just go somewhere else, and take our business elsewhere. So it's comparing now with sustainable tourism and looking at the various options there. I'll give you another example where there's a biking hiking route called the Parenzana Trail. It's a very family-friendly trail that passes through multiple villages. The trail was developed through a regional cooperation and utilized old railroad lines that came out of use when the car became more ubiquitous. A humorous story is that when Mussolini had a certain part, or controlled a certain part of Croatia as a part of Italy, he also had designs on colonizing Ethiopia, and thought that building a rail line through Ethiopia would really help spur business interests for Italy. So at that point, the Parenzana Trail was not as utilized. So he had all of the tracks lifted up, loaded onto a ship, and sent the ship to Ethiopia, or on its way. And along the way, there was a storm and the ship sank. So no one ended up with any sort of train line, whether it be this now part of Croatia, and certainly not Ethiopia. But over the years, as tourism considerations came about, the villages got together, and now one can easily ride their way, or hike, walk their way from village to village, where you can stay the night in a local home, or a local small boutique hotel. Certainly support the different restaurants. More importantly, meet people and have some deeper connections and a deeper understanding of the history of the area. So this slide talks a little bit about, not so much against cruise ships and for biking trips, but talking more about how one can support local businesses better, and have deeper, as I mentioned, connections with people and learning about their stories. I do remember one of the villages there, it was specifically geared towards artists, and people would come far and wide to just study with the masters and just stay there. And you could see various examples of artisans as they were honing their craft. And it's a beautiful thing to just witness that, and something that certainly stays with you longer. So, one day with an agenda versus many days without an agenda, and the ensuing pleasures of that. A second example that I wanted to provide was Ecuador. On your left is a aerial shot of one of the islands that constitute the Galapagos Islands, particularly Puerto Ayoro. And it used to be within the Galapagos Islands that you could only take a small cruise boat to visit. But at some point, there was a determination made in order to generate more revenue for tourism that Ecuador allowed the building of hotels on certain islands. And increased competition amongst the hotels meant that there was less and less expensive places to stay on the Galapagos Islands, and certainly as you compare it to staying on a cruise boat. So when tourists stay on the island, certainly the money helps to go directly to the local community. That makes total sense. But the increasing number of tourists choosing hotels over ships has meant that there's growing concerns about the amount of litter that's being created. And this is a big problem in addition to the motorboat transportation issues, increased number of accidents, things like that have occurred, and inevitably how that affects the overall tourist experience when it comes to visiting the Galapagos Islands. Now, I'm not saying that there are the national parks are not being protected. They are. Especially from development like this, but it's the areas surrounding those national park areas where more and more buildings are being constructed, and in some cases high-rise buildings are even being constructed. So if one were to contrast that with sustainable travel in other areas of Ecuador that still offer an incredible experience and, of course, access to wildlife, let's look at the city of Quito. Vibrant city, certainly, but in the top left photograph, there's a small boutique hotel called La Reuniloma. And that particular hotel only offers a few rooms. Local materials were used to build. It uses locally sourced food. In fact, there's a restaurant attached to the hotel, which is remarkable. Peacocks and llamas are just grazing in and around this boutique hotel. And it's truly an oasis, at least I view it personally as an oasis from the noises of the city. And not to say that I don't enjoy visiting the city, but I find this to be a remarkable example of an experience that can be carved out and kind of created separately and have a unique position and view of the city and certainly offer a unique experience. Another example is outside Quito in another small boutique hotel called Hacienda El Porvenir, where you can, amongst other things, go horseback riding at the foothills of the Cotopaxi volcano and learn about the gaucho way of life. When you walk around the hacienda, all of the materials were locally certainly used for construction, but I'm thinking specifically around the decoration of the hacienda with the blankets that were made locally and the artisans that proudly display their work. And so it's a great testament to the culture of Ecuador that sometimes gets missed, especially in destinations like the Galapagos Islands. So in this example about Ecuador, it's talking about going off the beaten path, and not so much because you want to get away from the crowds, but you want to have a more immersive experience. And certainly it's tougher to get to these destinations. Sometimes it requires multiple modes of transport. But if you think about why you want to get away in the first place, to reflect, to connect, it might help make those decisions a little bit easier. So a third example is of Costa Rica. And, this is a destination that many of you probably have gone to, or at least know a lot about. And because Costa Rica has done a very, very good job marketing not only the power of sustainable tourism, but also people think of it first, at least Americans think of it first when they think about eco-travel, sustainable travel. But there's a flip side to what's happening. So I'm in particular referencing the photograph on the left on the northwestern Guanacaste coast. And it's a photograph that depicts tourists that are swarming in an Astanel wildlife refuge and essentially disrupting the nesting rituals of the turtles there. So lots of people gathered, and the visitors, in fact, stood in the turtles' way as they swam ashore. Some placed their children on top of the shells, the turtle shells. And the actions actually caused many of the turtles to just turn around and return to sea. And they didn't lay their eggs on that beach or anywhere along the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. Very, very sad situation, certainly. But let's compare that with other options within Costa Rica. So if you go down the coast towards the border with Panama, there's a lodge called Arenas del Mar, which, lo and behold, uses the nesting season as an opportunity to educate visitors. Further down the coast, there's another lodge, Luna Lodge, that's utilized its profits to buy up surrounding land so that developers cannot come in and ultimately affect the ecosystem. The ecosystem of the Osa Peninsula actually constitutes 5% of the world's most diverse biodiversity, and so it's very important for that area to be protected, and that's how this particular lodge utilizes its profits, as I mentioned. Another example, just northwest of San Jose, is an example of a lodge, a Pequare Lodge, where the only way to get there is by whitewater rafting your way to Pequare Lodge, where you learn about the indigenous culture of the area. You can go see the villagers and see how they live, and practice your Spanish. And it also provides the opportunity to study how the endangered jaguar is being protected in the area. And certainly, it's just a wonderful place to just relax and hear the sounds of the rainforest for a couple of days. Again, just trying to provide some specific examples of how mass tourism and sustainable tourism can be achieved, even going to that same destination. So certainly there are many other examples that can be found on my website, company website, greenloons.com. We only work with certified sustainable hotel and lodge owners and guiding companies. And just to make this very, very brief, the experiences we have include biking and or hiking along the western coast of Ireland, where at one point you can take the route that leads you along a beach. And for us, we were greeted by a local chef who just happened to rustle up some oysters and mussels and was cooking them beachside. That's a pretty phenomenal experience to have with just a few people on a beach. Or in Alaska, where instead of taking a cruise, you can stay in Kenai Fjords National Park in one of the few lodges that were allowed to be constructed, and you can hike and kayak your way through the park and then take the train to the entrance of Denali National Park. Or in Mexico, where you can stay in the country's only LEED Platinum certified lodge just south of Cancun and visit and learn from local chefs about the culinary history of the region. Or in Spain, where you can better understand the cultural secrets of this very diverse land, historical area as well. Or in Crete, you can spend a week on a farm-to-table or farm-to-fork tour of wineries and olive oil and honey producers and people who still make phyllo from scratch and participate in cooking classes and tastings, and visit people who love to share their stories and their recipes. These are all possible with sustainable tourism. So it's essentially a different way of looking at a vacation, one that rejuvenates and connects and supports the diversity of cultures. So to start wrapping up, I thought I would list some questions, 7 here, that might be worthwhile to ask as you consider your next destination, as well as the company that you'd like to support with your hard-earned money and time. So you're welcome, again, to take a screenshot here. And again, some of this information may be found on websites, but if not, it's great questions to ask along the way via email and chat and other mechanisms. And then finally, some travel tips. Don't necessarily follow the crowds. I know that media does a wonderful job of spotlighting certain destinations, but it may not be to your benefit to follow everyone else in terms of what the experiences that you're trying to get. You know, it's the curse of tourism. It is the positive feedback loop, right? So as you go through social media and you hear more and more about the new sensational destination that's coming online and how wonderful it is, it essentially enables massive increases in tourism development and access. So it is a curse. It's something that definitely the industry needs to focus more on and realize its impact and effect. But something that I think, again, as we look at on our individual choices that we make, can certainly make a more positive difference. So some travel tips here for you, and if you have any questions at all, you're very welcome to, I'm online now, you're very welcome to ask now, or you can contact me at a later time. I thank you so much for your time and attention today. I know it's quite valuable, and I hope that this has provided some good knowledge for you. Thank you again.
Hey everybody, welcome to the third day of the Sustainable Travel Summit. I'm Claire Hancock and I'm from Immersion Travel Magazine. Today we're ditching the tourist trail, where you'll learn a variety of experiences that sustainable travel offers, and you'll get a chance to travel around the world with experts like Curious on Tanzania, Echidna Walkabout Tours, Planeta, Green Loons, and many, many more. We're even going to talk about family travel. You can take part in the conversation in the chat window, or you can tweet at us at #ITMSummit17. Hostling International USA is also taking over our Instagram account today, so you can pop over and see what they're up to at Immersion Travel Mag. Today is sponsored by Local Aventura, a company that connects travelers and local guides in Latin America for a unique and authentic experience. But before we set out, I'd like to talk to you about our Kickstarter. Immersion Travel Magazine wants to be everything that your travel magazine should be, but we really can't do that without member support. So please see our Kickstarter, sign up for a membership today, and thank you for your support. Let's go. Next, we're going to see the world the way it wants to be seen. Visit.org is going to show us what it looks like to venture off the popular tourism path and see what adventures are out there waiting to be had. Visit.org is building the world's leading platform for engagement with nonprofits and other impactful organizations, allowing millions of users to discover, support, and interact with organizations both virtually and in person. They're making socially conscious travel easy, fun, and accessible. They feature only the best culturally immersive, impactful activities out there. Travelers add half or multi-day experiences to their itinerary and have an off-the-beaten-path adventure that they can feel good about. Their technology offers partner orgs to participate in the new global economy, and tour revenue is invested back into the local communities.
Life is an adventure. Live life to the fullest by giving life to others.
When I saved up enough money to come here, I realised I wanted to see the whole culture. I wanted to know everything, and I thought this was the best way.
Solo travelers, range of different ages that will come in looking for an international adventure that also at the same time want to make a positive impact on the environment.
It wasn't a typical vacation that people consider. It was definitely experience.
Food is one of those social necessities that brings people from every background together because you're learning together.
Watching this sunset from atop of a live volcano is really one of the best. Be off the well-beaten tourist track, and they often work closely with local communities, which means you get a really genuine impression of what the culture of a country is like. And as cheesy as it sounds, I think for me that's really where the heart of a country lies, is within its culture.
The tours are raising awareness and building understanding, while at the same time boosting the pride and self-esteem of local residents.
It is so important to realize that peace is based on understanding and respect, love and compassion.
is not a problem that we can solve in the future. We need to fix it now because extinction is permanent.
That was one of the most fantastic sights I've ever seen. I felt like, we were sort of in a National Geographic documentary or something.
Immerse yourself in authentic activities led by locals and inspiring communities. Visit.org is the world's largest platform for social travel experiences. 100% of host revenue is invested back into the community you visit, meaning you get to enrich important causes while encountering unique local culture. Meet the world in person with Visit.org.
Did you know that out of every $100 spent by the average tourist, only $5 remains in the destination's economy? Shouldn't tourism help the host economy and community rather than being pocketed by big corporations? Did you know that there are over 50,000 nonprofit organizations worldwide who can offer short-term cultural tours with the funds directly aiding to their causes? This is a new wave of tourism that benefits communities. And here at Visit.org, we want to open the world to a new era of travel.
Hi, I'm Michal. I'm the founder of Visit.org.
Hi, I'm Jolene and I'm co-founder of Visit.org.
So the idea of Visit.org came to me based on my experience working with a small nonprofit in Tel Aviv. We used to get a lot of requests from people who wanted to come and learn more about our work, visit our facility, interact with members of the community, and basically learn more than what they get in the media. So then we thought, well, why not create a formal program, a visit program, where we can actually host these visitors and create economic opportunities for the members of our community around it. This became a hugely popular and successful program. What if we take thousands of other organizations that are super passionate about their causes and about their work and have them share this with the world? What if we took it up and make a Visit.org?
At Visit.org, we connect with nonprofits who offer short-term tours as a means of funding. Our tour activities range from weaving Andean artistry in Peru to caring for the rescued elephants of Thailand. Visitors no longer have to stand on the sidelines, but can now join into the experience. However, without the means of proper marketing, it is nearly impossible for these orgs to get recognized for the unique opportunities they offer. We want these orgs to grow alongside us. By creating these partnerships, we look to build awareness that will result in more finances, connections, and advocacy for these nonprofits. In order to make this possible, we have built a team of international country leaders who connect with nonprofits in their area. Our team includes leaders in Peru, Israel, South Africa, Greece, New York, Brazil, and India. By having our team working from inside the countries, we are able to easily reach these nonprofits and make it available for you, the traveler, to have the experience.
We are Visit.org, meet the world in person.